I never thought I'd be the type of person to consider installing a security system that could rival a small military base, but then HOA Karen came along. She had a knack for showing up uninvited, and not just once or twice. No, she made it a daily ritual. Cruising down my long ranch driveway, honking, yelling, sometimes even hopping out of her car to lecture me about community rules that didn't even apply to my property. I'd had enough. It all started on a sunny Tuesday morning. I was sipping coffee on my porch, enjoying the quiet that comes from living on a few hundred acres, when I heard it, a familiar, aggressive honk. Sure enough, there she was again, slowly rolling down my driveway in her shiny SUV, glaring like she owned the place. I could see her tapping the steering wheel impatiently, probably rehearsing her next complaint about my messy yard or my animals wandering a little too close to the fence line. I called out to her from the porch, trying the polite approach. Karen, this is private property. Please don't come down the driveway. But Karen didn't hear me, or maybe she just didn't care. She continued forward, inching closer to my barn, eyes fixed on some imaginary violation. That's when I realized that reasoning with her was a waste of time. She wasn't just overstepping boundaries, she was ignoring them entirely. The thing about living on a ranch is you need boundaries that actually mean something. Fences, gates, and signs aren't just decorations, they're security measures. But apparently Karen had never gotten that memo. I started making mental notes of all the ways she had crossed lines. The time she parked by my horse pen, the morning she demanded I trim trees that shaded her mailbox, and the evening she tried sneaking up to my workshop to inspect my property. Every single incident added fuel to my growing frustration. That's when the idea hit me. If she wasn't going to respect signs or gates, I'd have to make my driveway literally impossible for her to invade. Something that would make the words private property mean more than just a polite suggestion. I could see it clearly in my mind. A no-go zone she wouldn't dare enter again. A setup that was firm, unmistakable, and maybe even a little shocking. I spent that evening sketching out plans, researching the best ways to protect my land without putting myself in legal hot water. By the end of the night, I had a blueprint ready, a driveway that would finally send Karen a crystal clear message. She was not welcome here. I knew this wasn't going to be a gentle warning. It had to be a statement she couldn't ignore. The next morning, I woke up early with one goal: turn my driveway into an untouchable zone. I wasn't planning to confront Karen directly. Experience had taught me she thrived on drama, but I wanted her to learn a lesson she wouldn't forget. I pulled on work gloves, grabbed tools, and headed out to start transforming my property into a fortress. First, I reinforced the gate at the entrance of my driveway. It wasn't just any gate. It was a solid steel structure, with thick hinges and a locking mechanism that required a key. I made sure the lock clicked loudly when engaged, a sound that carried across the yard. That alone was a deterrent, but it wasn't enough. Karen was persistent, and persistence sometimes borders on recklessness. Next, I added clear signage, bright, bold letters that spelled out private property, no trespassing. Positioned them at eye level on both sides of the driveway, with a secondary set near the gate. I wanted her to know, unmistakably, that she was entering restricted territory. But signs alone don't stop someone determined to break the rules. That's why I decided to take the next step. Motion-activated lights. I installed lights along the driveway, each one angled precisely to illuminate anyone stepping onto my property after dark. Not only would they catch an intruder, but they would also give me early warning if Karen ever tried another sneak attack. By the time I finished, the driveway looked professional, like a high-security entrance to a private estate. I even added cameras, discreetly hidden among the trees, so I could record anyone foolish enough to ignore the warnings. It didn't take long for Karen to notice the changes. The very next day, as I was feeding the horses, I saw her car creeping down the road, slowing as she approached my driveway. Her face twisted in disbelief as she took in the fortified gate, the bold signage, and the blinking lights. I didn't move, didn't wave, didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I just watched her frown, muttering under her breath, clearly reassessing her strategy. That's when I realized something important. She wasn't going to give up, not without testing the limits. And that meant I needed to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. One where I wouldn't just stand my ground, but where the driveway itself would do the talking. By the end of the day, I had one more element in place. A subtle, but effective deterrent that would ensure Karen would never dare step onto my property uninvited again. Her next move was coming, and I was ready. Only this time, the advantage was mine. And the driveway wasn't just a boundary anymore. It was a warning system that she would regret ignoring. I thought Karen might finally take the hint, that the steel gate, glaring signs, and motion-activated lights would be enough to stop her. I was wrong. A few days later, I spotted her car inching down the road again, creeping toward my property like a predator circling its prey. But this time, she didn't just slow down. She stopped just short of the gate, leaning out the window and muttering angrily to herself. It was clear she was weighing her options, trying to find a loophole or an excuse to justify stepping onto my land. I stayed out of sight, watching from the porch as she pulled out her phone and began snapping pictures, probably planning another complaint to the HOA about restricted access or unfriendly neighbors. Could almost hear her thoughts. How dare he treat me like an intruder? This is my community too! That's when I knew subtlety wasn't enough. She wasn't respecting boundaries. She was testing them. And if I wanted her to finally understand, I needed to escalate. But it couldn't be dangerous or illegal, just effective. My solution had to be clever, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. I walked down to the driveway, checking the gate, the cameras, and the lights. Everything was in place. But the final piece of the puzzle, the one that would truly turn the driveway into a no-go zone, was still missing. I spent the afternoon setting up a system that would make Karen's next approach completely futile. I won't lie. I felt a mix of satisfaction and anticipation as I worked. Every adjustment, every small tweak, was designed to make the property uninviting for the most persistent trespasser. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I saw her again. This time, she tried to creep past the gate, hoping to slip onto the property under the cover of dim light. That's when everything clicked. The motion sensors triggered, the lights blazed on, and my cameras silently recorded every second. Karen jumped back in shock, her face a perfect mixture of anger and disbelief. She honked, yelled, and waved her arms, but it was too late. The driveway wasn't just a line on a map anymore. It was a barrier she couldn't overcome. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't need to argue or threaten. The message was clear, loud, and unavoidable. Step onto my property without permission, and you'll be stopped. Watching her retreat, muttering curses under her breath, I realized this was exactly the moment I had been waiting for. She had pushed, tested, and tried to overstep every boundary. But the driveway had won the battle before. I even said a word. I went inside that night feeling a strange mix of relief and triumph. Karen wouldn't forget this lesson anytime soon, and more importantly, I had regained control of my land without ever having to escalate to confrontation. The property was safe, and the intruder's attempts had been neutralized without a single risky move on my part. The next morning, I woke up early, curious to see if Karen would make another attempt. I didn't have to wait long. From the porch, I spotted her SUV idling near the entrance, tires crunching the gravel as she studied my driveway like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. But this time, there was hesitation in her movements, a stark contrast to the confidence she once had. The steel gate, glaring no trespassing signs, and the bright lights had finally sunk in. She wasn't sure if she dared risk stepping onto my property again. I could see her weighing her options, pacing her frustration behind the steering wheel. Every so often, she'd peek past the gate, trying to figure out if there was a way to bypass the security measures I'd installed. But there was no bypass, no weak point. Every potential route she could take was accounted for, monitored and controlled. The driveway was no longer just an entryway. It was a fortress, a statement, and a deterrent all at once. After a few minutes, she finally pulled away, muttering under her breath, frustration and defeat clear in every motion. I didn't gloat or wave. I simply watched as she drove off, her persistence finally broken. It was a strange feeling, watching someone who once believed they could control or intimidate you walk away, finally realizing they were powerless. I felt a wave of relief, satisfaction, and yes, pride. My property, my rules, my space, it was fully mine again. I spent the rest of the day walking the perimeter, inspecting my gates, lights, and cameras. Everything was working perfectly. Not only had I stopped Karen from trespassing, but I had also created a system that would protect my property from anyone else who thought they could ignore boundaries. The driveway had become a no-go zone, and the message was crystal clear: respect this land, or face consequences without ever having to lift a finger. Later that week, I noticed the neighborhood had changed too. There was a subtle shift in the way people approached my property. Neighbors who used to treat my land as casually as their own suddenly gave it a wide berth. Word spreads fast in a small community, and Karen's failed attempts had become something of a cautionary tale. My no-go driveway wasn't just a boundary. It was proof that standing your ground intelligently works better than arguing endlessly. By the end of the week, I could finally enjoy the quiet that had drawn me to ranch life in the first place. Karen was gone, temporarily at least, and I could focus on the things I loved: my animals, my land, and the freedom to live without constant interruptions. The steel gate, the signs, the cameras, the lights. They weren't just tools. They were my statement, my victory, and my peace of mind. Karen had tried to trespass, but the driveway had spoken louder than any confrontation ever could. My property was mine again, and this time no one would question it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more crazy HOA Karen encounters, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me what you would do if this happened on your property. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a wild story like this.